Welcome to Career Explore Northwest Live. My name is Tina Swanek, and I'm the Career Explore Northwest producer for KSPS PBS Public Television in Spokane, Washington. Career Explore Northwest Live is an interactive Zoom event that connects young people with professionals to learn about careers and career paths. And we're really excited. Today, we're going to be exploring the career of an executive chef with the help of our special guest, Chef Travis Dickinson of Cochinito Taqueria. Cochinito is a popular Mexican restaurant and catering company that uses fine dining techniques and responsibly sourced ingredients to create artistic soft tacos bursting with layers of flavor. Cochinito has two locations, one in Spokane, Washington, and the other in Hayden, Idaho. Chef Travis, thank you so much for being with us today. Also joining us today are students from Mount Spokane High School with Counselor Josh Cowart, and students from Lewis and Clark High School with Family and Consumer Science teacher and Culinary Club advisor Brian Porter. Thank you all for being with us today. And before we get started, I wanted to quickly share the agenda for today's event. First, Chef Travis will give us a quick tour of Cochinito, then tell us about his work as an executive chef and his career and educational journeys. And then we'll open the floor to questions from our student guests. We won't be taking any questions through chat today, and instead we'll be engaging in this live discussion. Okay, let's get started with our event. Again, welcome Chef Travis. I'll let you take it from here.
Hi, I'm Chef Travis Dickinson. You're here at Cochinito Taqueria in downtown Spokane. Just taking a little trip through the restaurant. So as we're coming this way, this would be the normal guest experience, coming up to the counter to order. We're a counter service restaurant, so rather than servers at your tables, place an order up here at the counter. Got a full bar. We'll make your drinks right here, send you off to a table, give you a little number that corresponds to your order, and the food will follow you out. So meant to be really fast, casual, a little more approachable, and not so stuffy. Travel down the full bar. We've got our awesome mural up on the wall here. This is done by a friend of mine, Jeremy Vermillion. Our Hayden location has a really similar mural done by another artist named Nick Vigil. Something we're really proud of, and it's kind of become one of our signature looks. If you follow me this way, we'll come back around to the kitchen. Pretty busy in here and a little bit of a tight space. So we'll slip right on into the prep kitchen here and work our way behind Adam. This is where all the sauces, braises, meats, spices, things are assembled. Adam's cleaning up some chilies right now for various projects he's working on. As we come back around this way, you can see the full kitchen, everything heating up for the day. The guys just finished making all of our fresh tortillas, heating up all the meats, sauces, everything here is house made. So a lot of workers are going to be getting this thing off the ground every morning. We'll come back right around where we started.
Thank you so much for that quick tour of your restaurant, Chef Travis. I'll let you take it from here and give us some background on your educational and career journey.
I got started in this industry back when I was about 15 years old. I was a little skateboard kid that kept breaking boards and needed some pocket change. So took a job at the Coeur d'Alene Resort washing dishes. Sort of worked my way up there through the next few years. Just kind of fell in love with the kitchen, with the cast of characters, the adventure, how fast paced it was. Kind of decided it was the space for me. And as I got to the end of my high school career, needed to make that big decision of what to do with my life. And at the time, I was getting ready to venture into a physical therapy career and made a last minute switch to go to Portland, Oregon, attend Western Culinary Institute, and pursue restaurants. So here we are now. And then, yeah, I kind of worked my way through some restaurants in Portland, did a few different spots there from Northwest cuisine to fine dining Italian. Really fell in love with kind of Mexican cooking and Mexican cuisine, really because most of my staff at those restaurants was Hispanic, Mexican, Guatemalan, Honduran guys that worked for me. And this is kind of the way we ate on weekends and on breaks. And yeah, sort of knew that this was what I wanted to do. I knew fine dining was kind of taking a weird turn. I wanted to do something a little more casual and approachable. So I started writing up the plan for what Cochinito is now. Moved back to Spokane in 2014, took a job at a fine dining restaurant here. And then as I was doing that, kind of making connections, getting to know everybody in town, started building out the business plan to open this. And we opened in 2018. We will turn 7 years old actually on Thursday. So we just had our seventh anniversary party in here this weekend.
Thank you so much, Chef Travis, and congratulations on your success rising through the ranks over the years, not only in terms of position, but also in your education. It's a very inspiring journey. And now we'll start the question and answer portion of our session. And as a reminder today, we won't be taking any questions through the chat. So we'll start with a question from Mount Spokane High School, and then we'll take a question from Lewis and Clark, and we'll continue with that order throughout the event. So Mount Spokane, what is your first question for Chef Travis?
I was wondering if he knows any good colleges to start off culinary, or like any good ones that are good for culinary.
Any good culinary programs to start off with kind of in this region?
Yes.
Is that the question? Yeah, I know Spokane Community College has a really awesome culinary program. I know some of the chef instructors up there. They work really well through the community. They've done some pretty cool stuff, and a lot of the good chefs in town have come through there. So there is a really awesome local option. Western Culinary in Portland, Oregon, I believe, is still going on, or Oregon Culinary Institute down there. And then I believe there's a couple programs in the Seattle area too. But yeah, I've been really pleased to see how the guys coming through Spokane Community College do, how they train people up. They're really on top of new techniques, emerging trends, things like that, in ways that even, the school I went to that was out of town, a lot more expensive, didn't seem to be. So I think that's a super good option right here locally.
Okay, Lewis and Clark.
I was curious, what's your favorite dish to cook and why?
Oh, my favorite dish to cook. It changes a lot, but I really like things that take a whole lot of time to cook and slow braise in the oven. Right now, I love making moles. Mole is one of the classical Mexican sauces, sort of a fundamental. Hails from the state of Oaxaca. In Oaxaca, they recognize 7 different moles. It's kind of the classic styles, but there's a ton of variations. And typically, you're making those sauces with a bunch of dried chilies, bunch of nuts, seeds, whole different stages of ingredients. They take a ton of time to prepare, and then you're slowly cooking meat right in that sauce for 3 to 4 hours in the oven. So it's just that tender kind of fall apart braised stuff. But even when I was cooking Italian food, I love those braised dishes, things that cook in the oven for a long time, just kind of fall apart, really, soul nourishing, hot, yummy food. So but yeah, I really just love the fundamentals, especially with what we're doing in Cochinito. I love making fresh tortillas. I like making salsas from scratch. I really like the things that, keep my hands in from start to finish. So you can look at a plate of food and know that you didn't buy any prepared ingredients in that thing. You took it from start to finish.
Next question, Mount Spokane.
What are some things you do and don't like about your job?
Well, the things I do like the most is that this is never the same day to day. I think this is one of the few remaining industries where it's completely unpredictable. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, but we have the ability to continually create, run different specials, change the menu, play with new things. It's a medium that's ever evolving. So there's always new techniques, there's always new ingredients, there's boundaries to be pushed all the time. So in that aspect, it never gets boring. Like this is just constantly intellectually nourishing. I can keep moving forward, keep pushing, keep trying new things. The things I don't like, especially as I get older now, I've got a daughter, I've got a family at home, is just the hours that this takes. This isn't, especially once you get to the top of this is not a 40-hour a week industry. I work 60 to 70 hours a week pretty regularly. I won't have a day off with restaurant week coming for about 2 weeks now. And that's just sort of how it is. It's how it's always been. It's what it takes to get it done. But that comes with sacrifice. And when I was younger in my 20s, it was a little more fun than it is now, having a little girl at home that misses me when I'm not around. So that's kind of the harsh reality of this industry. Is it's tough, it's hot, there's sharp things and knives and ways to hurt yourself, and you put in a lot of hours. But if you love it and if you find the rewards and the other aspects of it, then it's totally worth it.
Lewis and Clark, what is your next question?
What is your take on the Spokane restaurant industry, and how does it compare to elsewhere?
That's a great question. I think the Spokane restaurant scene's in a really cool place. I really felt that right before the COVID pandemic hit, this city was really emerging as like one of the top food cities in the Northwest. I think we're attracting chefs from other places, big cities like Portland, Seattle, LA. It's a little harder to make a name for yourself. The rents are higher. There's so much more competition. So chefs like myself are coming from Portland. People are coming from Seattle. Even people with well-established restaurant groups in those places are recognizing Portland or recognizing Spokane and coming over here, to start a business, to open a new restaurant, to try a new concept. COVID kind of slowed that down. In the last few years, we've really seen that rebound of it where, the scene's starting to build again. There's new places popping up. We're seeing kind of the young guys that were our line cooks and sous chefs and you know, the people under us in years past rise up and start their own restaurants, start their own businesses. So I think it's a really cool growing food scene. I really do think the food here rivals any of the major cities in the Northwest. We get out and, you know, take trips and eat everywhere we go. And I'm just as happy to dine in Spokane as I am in any of the bigger cities. So I'm really, really proud of this food scene. I think the really cool thing here is that it's still a small city. So we're all still really collaborative. Like, most of the chefs in this city genuinely like each other. We get along, we help each other, we help the community. There's a big sense of like giving back to the community here in the restaurant industry. And you don't see that sometimes in bigger cities where it's a little more cutthroat and everybody's, you know, fighting for business. So I'm really proud of where it is right now. I like it here.
Mount Spokane, next question.
What are some things you wish you knew prior to entering the culinary industry?
Oh, that's a good one. Um, you know, there's times where, in all honesty, I wish I would have sat back and thought about a job where I'd work less hard and make a lot more money. You know, the reality of this is very few people get wealthy doing what I do. You know, I wish I would have planned financially a little earlier in my career when I was young, didn't have the bills I have now, and started to make a little bit of money. Um, I wish I would have had the foresight to know the effects of having a family and trying to work these hours. You know, I might have planned it a little differently. It's a hard question because I really, really love what I do. And it's just a part of my soul. I can't imagine myself doing anything else. But then there are times where I wish I was doing something else. You know, there's times where that desk job that pays a lot better and I get a lot more free time looks pretty attractive, you know, at the end of one of these long weeks. But I think if I had known earlier in my life how to kind of set myself up a little bit better for success in my future, that probably would have helped a bit. But you know, I was in my 20s and liked to play and took took a lot of fun trips instead of saving money and buying property like I probably should have. But I think, yeah, it's easy to look back and wish you knew other things when you were younger, but that's not the path I took, and I'm pretty happy with where I ended up. So
Lewis and Clark?
Have you studied different cultures along with different foods?
yeah, I think that's really part of the game, and that's always kind of a tricky one because to cook another culture's food, you really want to pay respect and homage to that culture. You know, we talk a lot about cultural appropriation and how that fits into society. You know, and I'm a white guy cooking Mexican food, so I fall right into that, right? But Mexican cuisine especially is one that I've studied quite a bit. My wife is Mexican. We travel there to see family quite a bit. You know, I'm really connected to that cuisine and that lifestyle. So that's one I've leaned into pretty heavily. I really do love cooking different Asian cuisines. I cook Thai food, Vietnamese food, things like that at home. And that's something that's constant study because until you really spend a lot of time like doing another culture's cuisine, it takes so long to perfect any of it, right? So my background was always in like French Italian cuisine. The culinary school I went to was really French leaning, so they beat French technique into you. You know, back then that was kind of the pinnacle of fine dining. And in the 20 some years since then, we've really started to pivot to where it's, you know, looking at other cultures, cuisines, bringing in new ingredients, new flavors, new techniques from outside that little like Mediterranean bubble that we were all trained in. So it's been fun to just buy cookbooks. Like I love to read. I love buying cookbooks from not just like the celebrity chefs, but just other cultures. You know, buy a Korean cookbook, play with things, learn to make the stuff in there, mess around making kimchi, whatever that is. So yeah, it's just constant. There's so much to learn, and that's what I was talking about in the beginning. It never stops. There's so many cultures, there's so many weird ingredients, there's so much stuff to play with. So I feel like I'm constantly doing that.
Next question, Mount Spokane.
What type of qualities do you usually look for when hiring?
It's funny in this industry because what you really need are people that can just show up every day and, you know, get going and go strong. And they're things that are hard to identify in an interview. It's hard to pick up somebody's work ethic. So obviously we're looking for experience. We're looking to figure out what people have done, where they've been, the restaurants they have worked in, or the industries they've been in. Are they fast paced like us? Do they take attention to detail? But really, when I interview, it's a lot more of a gut feeling in this industry. I'm looking behind somebody's eyes and I'm trying to figure out what makes them tick. I like to ask questions about things outside of this industry just to gauge their level of passion, not just for doing this, but just in life. You know, you want people that are really excited about something else outside of here because that's a passion that can translate into what we do here. So if somebody's super into photography or skateboarding or art, I like to hear about that in an interview because I like to know that, man, this is a person that's driven for something. I can teach them how to do this. I can teach them to be driven for this if they have that thing inside them that makes them excited about the next task at hand. So, and then I just look for people that are obviously professional, punctual, show up early for the interview, show up dressed well. Oftentimes in kitchens, this is kind of that fringe element society. We attract the ruffians and the hooligans sometimes, but I still like to see those people put on a nice button-up shirt, show up for the interview. I think that's a good sign of respect still. And yeah, just be at your best, answer questions honestly. I look for a little bit of a connection. I want to find somebody that can sit with me for 15 minutes and we can have a real conversation. It's not just questions off a sheet.
Next question, Lewis and Clark.
If you were to quit your job, where would you want to work?
If I was to quit my job, where would I want to work? I think at this point in my career, I'd probably go where all chefs go to die and work in the food service sector, work for one of the brands that actually brings the food to the restaurants. I think if for some reason Cochinito didn't work out, I don't see myself at this point going to be a chef for somebody else now that I've done it on my own for so long. So obviously I'm really hoping that this one works out and we can keep opening other locations and keep this going. But I think the next step would probably be moving towards something that's a little more of a 9-to-5 type of job, probably selling food or helping companies find new products. I really love sourcing new and interesting things. So being like a consulting chef for another company would be cool. I've leaned in quite a bit in the last few years to like private chef services. So outside of Cochinito, I go do private caterings, dinner parties, wine pairings, things like that. I have a pretty decent background in the wine and spirits world too. So I like leaning into those two things. So if I could make that private chef thing work someday, that'd be pretty cool too. But yeah, I try not to think of the next step because I'm really trying to push this little step to work.
Next question, Mount Spokane.
Since you're on your feet all day, what type of shoes do you wear?
That's a really good question because I'm 6 knee surgeries deep. I don't know if you see me shuffling back here, but between skateboarding and working on my feet for so long, my legs have taken a beating. But yeah, good pair of shoes is super important in the kitchen. I use like the Shoes for Cruise style brands or Dansko's or anything like that. The biggest deal is a good little bit of cushion, and even bigger, something that's non-slip. Even if it's something cheap, I mean, like Walmart has a line of Shoes for Cruise brand shoes that are $25 a piece. Not the most comfortable all day, but the non-slip thing works. That's where people get hurt the most in this industry, is just wet, greasy floors and taking a spill trying to run around too fast. So yeah, but find something comfortable because yeah, 12, 14 hours on your feet, you start to feel it if you don't have it.
Lewis and Clark, what is your next question?
What was the most stressful catering job that you've ever had?
Oh, the most stressful catering job I ever had was just about a month and a half ago. We had rented out this entire restaurant for a private party. One of the local real estate firms in town was going to come in do their Christmas party here. So we planned on closing to the public. We had this thing all set out. We're going to do a cool little buffet, full spread for them, had the bar all ready to go. And we're in a 120-year-old building that's under renovation now. And we had a pretty major plumbing catastrophe hit about 3 hours before that catering was supposed to start. So I ended up calling another chef in town who had recently closed his restaurant, was using it just as a catering kitchen. He was kind enough to let me use his space. So instead of doing what we'd prepared all week to cook out of here, we pulled our catering truck around, packed up all the food, built a little bar that we could take on the fly with us, drove everything over to somebody else's restaurant across town, set up in there, and somehow still got up and running in time to cater the party. So that was one that when that first hit, I thought we were just going to have to call these people and say, hey, sorry, no Christmas party. And we put our heads down, luckily had some good friends and made it work. But that was about as stressed out as I've ever been.
Mount Spokane, next question.
What type of skills do you use like most currently? Kitchen skills.
As far as like the hard skills or just general skill, I guess I can answer that both ways. I mean, general skills, multitasking is the biggest thing here. I had a job shadow yesterday from one of the local high schools, and that's what he's watching me bounce around the kitchen, run a prep shift. And, if you're not doing 5 things at once in this industry, you're falling behind. If you look at a prep list for the day and you try and do one single item at a time, you're going to be here for 15 hours instead of 6. If you can get 4 or 5 things in, take a good look at a list and schedule your tasks accordingly, and always have this constant clock running in your brain of like, this is what I need achieved by this time while this other thing's working. takes a lot of mental juggling. So that's, I mean, 90% of the skill set you need in this is just being able to keep your brain moving, always be 2 steps ahead of yourself. And then the day to day, I mean, I'm still really, really active in the kitchen. So knife skills are the one that I use a lot. It's one that we look for a lot in people that are, coming into the kitchen, because it's so important for A, safety, you're playing with knives, but B, quality of ingredients, how things look, finished product, like being able to use a knife well, make the right kind of cuts we're asking you and be safe with it is pretty paramount.
Lewis and Clark?
How much do you spend in a day on operational cost?
So operational costs for a restaurant, typically your goal has always been historically about 60% of your revenue. Right now it's creeping up on us to where if you're running under 70, you're pretty lucky. So restaurants are classically a very, very hard industry to make any money in. If at the end of the day you're making 10 cents on every dollar profit, you're excelling as a restaurant. Right now, running my financials for next year, my hope is that I can make 4% profit in revenue, which is lower than it's ever been, but it's kind of the reality of where we are. Your labor costs are so much higher than they've ever been. Food costs is so much higher. All the little things like chemicals, gloves, things like that. I think our industry is in a very, very tense, weird period right now. I think it's harder right now to run a restaurant than it's ever been financially. And I don't see a lot of that letting up unless there's some kind of big reckoning. And really the only thing that that's going to be is it getting a lot more expensive to go out and eat, unfortunately. And we get in this weird game as restaurants where we're all kind of looking at each other, waiting to see who the first guy to raise their prices is going to be, because we're all at a spot right now where we need to do it to justify what we're spending on product and people, but nobody wants to price themselves out of the market either. So long-winded answer to that question, but right now, yeah, if we can make 4% profit, we're pretty stoked. 5 years ago, we were making 10% pretty easily. So it's taken a big turn in the last few years.
Next question, Mount Spokane.
So, how much has inflation affected your restaurant as like a whole, or just like how much had it affected you? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. It leans in a little bit to that last one. Inflation affects us harder than a lot of other industries because people just don't, it takes people's brains a while to catch up to why restaurant prices go up. That's a really weird thing where people can go to the grocery store once a week and they buy eggs, right? That's the hot button thing right now. And they know eggs cost more, but they won't come in here and realize I put eggs in everything. All of a sudden my prices are higher. Why is that? Especially with the food we do, tacos are historically something that people think of as a cheap eat, right? $2 Taco Tuesday. And Cochinito's not that. We're a fine dining taco spot. I'm doing a higher quality of ingredient. I'm applying a lot of techniques. We do like our carne asada taco. Instead of just grilling off some meat, we're cooking that sous vide for 20 hours, applying techniques that take a lot of time, energy, and money. So we cost a lot more than the average, taco shop does. But yeah, as inflation rises, we have a harder time as an industry keeping up with it, because we can't just say, oh my God, all of a sudden eggs are expensive, I'm going to go in and increase my prices across the board. We really don't always have that luxury to stay on top of it. And if you raise your prices enough to justify inflation, you risk people just not coming to eat, right? Because now all of a sudden you're too expensive. So I always use the analogy of like when we opened here, our carne asada taco, we use all choice tri-tips sourced locally. When we opened, that product was $4.75 a pound. I pay it about $9.80 a pound at times right now. So we've gone up more than double. I haven't been able to raise the price of that dish double, or I'd be selling $8 tacos and nobody'd come eat. So I'm trying to figure out how to make that money up elsewhere, right? I'm trying to keep my labor costs lower, trying to put other things on the menu that are cheaper product costs that I can charge a bit more for. It's almost this game of smoke and mirrors to justify, keeping up with inflation. It's getting harder and harder. So, but this industry figures it out. We always find a way and keep pushing forward.
I think we have time for about 2 more questions. So Lewis and Clark, next question.
What new skills have you developed as a professional since taking this role?
Taking what?
Taking this role.
It's a good one. I mean, you realize once you start restaurant ownership that you can't just be a chef anymore. It's not all about playing with food and creating new dishes and, making fancy garnishes. Now it's all the real stuff. I'm having to learn how to keep taxes paid, do payroll, Keep up on, all your quarterlies, all your government paperwork, all your filings and things, so that back office stuff is a whole learning experience. Financial management's a big one. I always, in the past, before I owned a restaurant, I managed the financials in the terms of knowing like, this is what my food cost is, this is what my labor cost is, this is our profit. I knew all of that. What I didn't understand is how much money comes in and out of your bank account at a given time. And that's such an eye-opening lesson to a lot of chefs, I think, when they open their first restaurant, is you can go from having 50 grand in your bank to nothing in 1 week because your federal taxes came out, your payroll hit that same week, you had to pay the laundry company and you had to pay US Foods or whatever it is. So really keeping an eye on like long-term budgeting, I think, has been the most important thing I've learned, and having a constant calendar of like when those big bills, when those big expenses come due, and keeping an eye on it, because there's times where it gets really, really tight right when you think you're on top of the world. So you learn a lot of that management skill, and then just the people stuff. You're always learning how people work, how to keep your crew happy, how to keep people coming in, and the most important thing we can do here is have a strong staff, trying to constantly keep them happy, motivated, feeling great is one of the biggest tricks of my job.
Did you learn all of that on the job, or did you take any classes?
No, that's all just on the job, especially the people skills stuff. That's just situational and kind of learning from your mistakes. The financial side of stuff, I didn't take any classes, but we have had a lot of help. There are great resources in the community. We worked with the Small Business Association when we were first planning this place. We still can use them for questions, answers, things like that. We actually got some legal counsel through Gonzaga's student law program when we were opening that taught us a lot of stuff. And then we did hire some professionals. We have like a business services company we work with that assists in some of our payroll, our tax filings, things like that. So they keep us pretty up to date on what we're doing. But a lot of it is, trying to find that balance of like seeking professional help, but seeking professional help that you can afford too. It's great to have a whole team of payroll people, but like here, my business partner's wife does all our accounts receivable. So we kind of keep it all in the family, and we've sort of just learned as we've gone. And I don't know that we're perfect at it yet, but we've figured out a lot since day one. We've gotten a lot better at it.
Okay, thank you. Mount Spokane, this will be the last question for the event.
How do you like design your menu and how much each item costs?
So you have kind of your rough food cost percent. I actually have a program I call menu engineering. It's one I've used forever, that goes in and I have my inventory, what all my products on my shelf cost. I have those all broken down into costed recipes. And then I can cost out each individual dish in there, and I can actually kind of figure out based on how many of each thing we're selling, how that affects my total food cost. So I know that right now I want to run about a 32% food cost as my goal. I try and make sure that most of my items cost well below that, because I know we're going to have a 15 to 20% waste factor, the trim from the vegetables, the mistakes, the things that get burnt. So on the very simple way of looking at it, you're trying to cost everything 20% or at a 30% margin with 20% room for error. But like I said, there's also some smoke and mirrors in there. I know that tri-tip taco costs more than that percentage that I want. So I need another option on the menu that I'm going to sell a lot of that's less, right? Maybe it's a braised pork taco. Pork's cheap right now. So I can run that at 20%, knowing that the tri-tip one runs at 30, and hopefully they kind of match in the end. So we're constantly taking a look at it, seeing what items sell a lot, trying to make sure that they're all priced appropriately. But the general rule of thumb right now is trying to hit about a 32% food cost on food. We'd run about a 25 on our beverage program.
Hey, thank you so much for all of the questions from our guest high schools. Chef Travis, is there anything that you would like to add that you feel is important for students to know if they're interested in a career in the culinary arts?
Yeah, I strongly encourage you, if you're considering a career in this, to go get a job in it, whether it's entry level, dishwashing, food running, busing, cooking, whatever you can get into. Get in the door before you make the decision and figure out if this is for you. Like I said, for me, this is a really rewarding industry. I love this. I'm really happy that I ended up in it. But I've had a lot of people come through the doors that I've talked out of this industry as well. Because if you're not passionate about this, this isn't an industry you want to do. Like I said, it's busy, it's chaotic, the hours are terrible sometimes. It's hot, it's sharp, it's, it's nuts. So if you don't love it, then it's not worth doing. There's a lot of jobs that are way easier where you can work less hard, honestly, and make a lot more money. But if you do love it, the rewards come in the artistic things you can do, the fun you can have. You know, if you're like me, that chaos drives you. Like I love this environment. I love the craziness. I'd be bored doing anything else. So I knew I was passionate about this before I committed to doing it. And I would really encourage anybody else thinking about it to make sure of that, because if it's the right career for you, it's one of the best ones. And if it's not, you're going to have a lot more fun doing something else. So.
Chef Travis, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate all of the information that you've shared with us, and it's been a lot. We've covered a lot of ground in a very short period of time. We also appreciate you opening up your restaurant to kind of show us around, give us the lay of the land, a better understanding of the structure of what you do, the business portion of it, the artistic portion of it, the educational portion of it. I feel like it's been a really good, comprehensive session, and I want to thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is awesome.
And thank you so much to Josh Coward and the students from Mount Spokane High School, and Brian Porter and the students from Lewis and Clark High School for attending today. We appreciate all of your thoughtful questions, and I know the majority of you are probably in culinary arts programs as well. So I hope you found this interesting and informative.